Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, bringing you some of the best college football news, predictions, and analysis. It is time for what is one of my favorite weeks in all of college football, Conference Championship Weekend. And this may be one of the biggest conference championship weekends we've had in a very long time, as 3 of these championship games are top 10 showdowns, and every single one of them will hold major college football playoff implications. So we are here to break down the 5 biggest conference championship games, all of which come from the Power 5 conferences. And once again, remember, these rankings up here on the board are from the AP poll. They are not our rankings. They are not the playoff rankings. They are the AP poll rankings, so we can continue to bring you these predictions every single Tuesday. So we're going to jump straight into it with the Pac-12 championship game, a very, very big one, more so for Utah than for Oregon. The Utes are in prime position to make the college football playoff now that Alabama lost to Auburn last week during rivalry week. That opened the door for Utah to slip into the playoff, assuming that LSU does in fact beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. We'll address that later, but we got to talk about Utah first. They have dominated this entire season. Outside of their lone loss to a solid 8-4 USC team, they've only had 2 games decided by 1 possession. That, of course, was the loss to USC and then a 5-point victory at Washington. They are so strong across the board. We've mentioned it every time we've talked about Utah. We talk about how dominant they are defensively, how dominant they are offensively, and the balance that they bring to the table. I will go out and say that I feel that they are more of a defensive-led team. They are more strong on the defensive side of the ball, allowing just 11.3 points per game and only 56.3 rushing yards per game. Take that into account that Oregon averages 178.6 rushing yards per game, so the Ducks will struggle mightily on the ground, as Utah has gone 10 games this season by allowing their opponents just to 70 rushing yards or less. So this is probably the best defense that Oregon is going to face so far this season. I know many will say Auburn, but from the way that Utah is playing, I would say that the Utes are going to be the toughest test that Oregon has had this season. On the other side, you look at Oregon. This is probably going to be one of the toughest offenses that Utah has faced since they lost to USC way back in September. That lone loss seems like it was a long, long time ago. Oregon, this game would be so much bigger and hold so much more weight for both teams if they just hadn't have lost to Arizona State just a few weeks ago. If they hadn't have done that, this could be a number 5 versus number 6 matchup, practically a college football playoff play-in game. But the Ducks went out to the desert, lost to Herm Edwards and the Sun Devils. They are right now number 13 in the country in the most recent AP poll, but can still win this game, have a conference title to their name, and then, of course, be playing in the Rose Bowl. They're averaging 35.8 points per game and allowed just 15.8 points per game. I think a lot of people, when you talk about Oregon, you think offense, you think Justin Herbert, you think C.J. Verdell, but you don't pay much attention to how well their defense is playing. They're playing extremely well. With the amount of points we just mentioned, they're only allowing 106.1 rushing yards per game, which is not a bad mark. But remember that balanced mark we talked about with Utah, they're led by Zach Moss. They're averaging over 150 rushing yards per game, with Zach Moss being the leader of that offense. And I don't know if Oregon's defense is going to be able to shut them down there. In a game like this, Oregon's going to have to rely heavily on the passing game. We mentioned they're not going to be able to run much against the Utes. So Justin Herbert, who's thrown for over 3,100 yards, 31 touchdowns, and just 5 interceptions, is going to be the key in this one. But across the board, Utah is way too strong defensively, and they are way too balanced offensively that the Oregon defense shuts down Tyler Huntley in the passing game. Zach Moss will pick up the slack, and if they shut down Zach Moss, Tyler Huntley, a dual-threat quarterback I should add, will take care of business there. I've got Utah winning the Pac-12 championship game, and when Selection Sunday rolls around, should be in the Final Four and make the college football playoff. Right below them, we have another game that if Utah were to lose to Oregon will hold a lot more weight. And we will know the outcome of that game because Utah and Oregon play on Friday, and the Big 12 championship game will be played on Saturday morning. a big-time rematch between Baylor and Oklahoma. As we all know, just a few weeks ago, an instant classic between the Bears and the Sooners, where Baylor blew a 28-3 lead at home and lost to Oklahoma 34-31. Like we mentioned, kind of like Oregon losing to Arizona State, had Baylor not lost to Oklahoma the first time around, imagine the weight of this game right here. Yes, Oklahoma would be a 2-loss team. Baylor still undefeated, but major implications would have been bigger had Baylor beaten Oklahoma. They're still big now for both teams trying to get into that Final Four spot. When you look at the Bears here, you look at how well they bounced back. After a crushing loss like that, you always wonder, how's the team going to respond? And that really relies on the players mentally, but it relies on the coaches to make sure they are prepared for the upcoming games. Just because they lose one, regardless of how heartbreaking it is or how big it is, they've got to be able to respond in a big way. And Matt Rule did a phenomenal job with his team, rallying his troops and winning their final 2 games over Texas and Kansas by a combined score of 85-16. So they did not lose any sleep after blowing that huge lead to Oklahoma. They knew they still had a chance to win the Big 12. They know they still have a chance to make the college football playoff, and they're showing it within the past 2 weeks. And they're going to show it here in this Big 12 championship game, one that Baylor can absolutely win. They nearly beat Oklahoma at home, and I have no doubt they can also beat Oklahoma at a neutral site. But the key in this game for Baylor is going to be, once again, get Charlie Brewer going, who dominated that first half in the first meeting this season, having 4 touchdowns, 2 passing and 2 rushing, but they also need to get that rushing game going with their running backs. Baylor averages 186 rushing yards per game. Oklahoma gives up 140. So that's a very generous rushing defense that if Baylor can attack, will be able to set up that passing attack and really get Charlie Brewer going just like he did the first time around. And hopefully, Baylor won't blow the lead. But on the other side, you have Oklahoma, a team that I have had concerns about as of late. They had that very unimpressive 28-24 victory at home over TCU following the win over Baylor. And then they went on the road and defeated Oklahoma State 34-16. That was more like it. That, to me, was a better performance than the one they gave against TCU. They shut down Chuba Hubbard, at least held him well below his season averages. Going on the road to a hostile environment in a rivalry game, Jalen Hurts putting up big numbers once again. That is the playoff team that many expected Oklahoma to be, and one that Oklahoma can be if they beat Baylor. Once again, that's going to be the key in this game, is the poise and the experience behind Jalen Hurts. He had over 400 yards versus Baylor the first time around, and they're going to need a similar performance from him in this game. In a game that I expect to be very close, much like it was a few weeks ago, the difference maker is going to be a player that didn't even play the first time these two teams met. And that's CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb, the explosive wide receiver, Jalen Hurts' favorite target from the Sooners. He did not play the first meeting against Baylor, and the Sooners still were able to win. Now that he will be back for this Big 12 championship game, that adds a whole nother dimension and a whole nother threat for this Oklahoma offense. Another thing that the Baylor defense is going to have to crack down on. It's close once again, but Oklahoma beats Baylor for the second time this season. Coming down at number 3, it's our game of the week, so don't worry. We're going to have plenty more analysis on this game coming just tomorrow on Wednesday. But it's the SEC Championship, by far the biggest game of this conference championship weekend. You have number 4 Georgia taking on number 1 LSU in the SEC title game in Atlanta. And the last time these two teams met was just last year. LSU beating Georgia 36-16 down in Death Valley. The last time these two teams met in an SEC championship game was way back in 2011 when LSU found themselves down 10-0 early against Georgia, but ended up winning the game 42-10. It should also be noted that 2011 was the last time that LSU finished the regular season undefeated. They finished the regular season undefeated this season as well. Not saying they're going to blow Georgia out, but something to note in this game. Now Georgia, with this game, if they win, they are in. Despite the loss to South Carolina earlier in the season, if they beat LSU, they are in the playoff. Obviously, LSU, if they win, they are in the playoff. So this is a win or you're in, or win and in scenario for both teams here. But for Georgia, they have a couple concerns offensively. We know they're going to be without their wide receiver, George Pickens, for the first half of this game. That, of course, due in part to the brawl and the fight that he got involved with in the Georgia Tech win just last week. There are also some injury concerns for DeAndre Swift going into this game. He should be ready to go, but if he is not 100%, that is going to be a big blow to this Georgia offense. You know, when you're facing a team like LSU, you cannot afford to find yourself down early. And so if these playmakers for Georgia are not able to get the job done in the first half, if Jake Fromm's not being able to rally his troops and have Georgia within striking distance or even leading at halftime, it's going to be very difficult for Georgia to win this game playing from behind in the second half. The offense has been a cause of concern as of late. Following the South Carolina loss, Georgia's averaging just 27.3 points per game. That's not bad. That's not a bad mark, but they're facing an LSU defense that over the course of the entire season has allowed just 22.1 points per game and seems to really be hitting their stride defensively over these past few weeks. So those are some key things to watch out for Georgia. And on the other side for LSU, we know what to expect from them. A high, fast-paced, high-octane offense led by Joe Burrow, the Heisman favorite, who's thrown for over 4,300 yards, 44 touchdowns, averages 390 passing yards per game, and averages 48.7 points per game as well. This LSU team across the board has been nearly unstoppable. And while this is a game that will really test LSU's offense because of Georgia's very strong defense, I just don't see the Tigers losing this game. I think all Georgia can do in this game is slow them down. They are not going to get blown out like many people think. But Georgia, in my opinion, will not win this game. They will slow down the Tigers, but they will still lose down in Atlanta. A big one in the SEC title game, but Georgia takes their second loss of the season and is eliminated from the college football playoff. Fourth on the list, we have the ACC championship game. Many will say, why do we even have this up here? Because it is a big game that if by some act of God, by some miracle, Virginia wins, would really shake up the college football playoff race. But I'm here to tell you that Virginia will not win. Congratulations to the Cavaliers for making their first ever ACC title game appearance. Congratulations to the Cavaliers for beating Virginia Tech for the first time in 15 years. But they will not defeat the Tigers. It is not going to happen. They are not going to defeat the team that has won the past 4 ACC championships. The only way that Virginia can win this game is that they get a game and a performance of a lifetime from Bryce Perkins, who has played well this season. 27 total touchdowns and nearly 3,000 passing yards. But if he does not perform, and if he gets shut down by this Clemson defense, the Tigers will run away with this game very quickly. Bryce Perkins is the Virginia offense. If you take him out of the equation, Virginia has no offense because he can run and he can pass. If you shut him down completely, there's nothing there. And that's what I think will exactly happen. I think the Clemson defense wakes up. Dabo Swinney's already mad enough for some reason. He's complaining about the College Football Playoff Committee hating them. So they're going to be mad enough as it is, trying to make a statement and maybe improve their seeding going into the College Football Playoff. You're looking at a team that's extremely balanced with Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne in the passing game and the rushing game. You're looking at a team that's averaging over 45 points per game and over 540 yards per game. Virginia, to me, guys, does not have a chance in this one. Clemson rolls in the ACC title game and is well rested going into the playoff. And then finally, we have the Big Ten championship game, one of which many will say, like the ACC title game, Wisconsin has no chance like Virginia. And I'm here to say that's not fully the case. I'm not going to agree with that. The FPI is giving Wisconsin an 18.4% chance to win this game. And as we all know, earlier this season, Ohio State did win 38-7. But that was in Columbus. Now it's at a neutral site. And it's extremely difficult to beat the same team twice in a single season. So that same goes for Oklahoma. And the same goes here for Ohio State against Wisconsin. But like Clemson, when you look at a team like Ohio State, is there anybody that can stop the Buckeyes? They are by far the most complete team in the country. They are extremely balanced. 253.7 passing yards per game. 280.6 rushing yards per game. And they allow just 232 yards per game total. That includes 91.2 rushing yards per game, which is, of course, bad news for Jonathan Taylor and the Wisconsin rushing offense that averaged nearly 250 rushing yards per game. Now, I will say that Jack Cohn really impressed me by going on the road and throwing for 280 yards and 2 touchdowns at Minnesota. To me, that gave the Wisconsin offense an extra dimension. It showed they are capable of winning a game through the air if a team were to take away the effect of Jonathan Taylor. But I just don't think that the Badgers can throw against the Buckeyes. They're going to have a little more success than they did last time. If you remember, the last time in Columbus, it was poor weather. It was on the road earlier in the season, coming off a loss to Illinois. The recipe for success was just not there for Wisconsin. So I like their odds a little bit better in this game at a neutral site, indoors, against the Buckeyes for the second time this season. But Wisconsin will not win this game. The only way they can do that is by shutting down J.K. Dobbins, who killed them for 163 yards and 2 touchdowns when they met back in October. Ohio State wins big in this one, showing once again why the committee believes they are the number 1 team in the country, and like Clemson, should be able to get their starters a little bit of a break in the fourth quarter and have them rested up for the college football playoff later on in December. So guys, it's a huge week of college football. It starts Friday with the Pac-12 championship, and then we have 9 other conference championship games all across Saturday. We only put 5 up here, but the group of 5 conference championships are going to be just as big. You've got Cincinnati and Memphis for the second week in a row, a game that could very well determine who makes a New Year's Six bowl game. You've got Appalachian State and Boise State playing in their respective championship games that if Memphis were to lose, maybe one of those teams could slip in to a New Year's Six bowl game. So while these are the Power 5 games, we've got some big ones all day Saturday, and you don't want to miss any of the action. It's one of the best weekends in all of college football. You don't want to miss it, and you don't want to miss what the committee has to say on Selection Sunday. And we, of course, will have coverage for that all next week. So guys, thank you for watching us here on YouTube. Make sure to like this video and check out everything we have for you in the description below for some exclusive college football content and offers. And once again, thank you for watching. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.